Welcome to Hidden Ties, where every story hides a deeper truth. It was supposed to be his big moment, my dad's retirement party, the culmination of decades of hard work. But when he called me up on stage, I had no idea the cruel joke he was about to play, until I took the mic and turned the whole room on its head. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. I was 47 years old when my dad retired, the man I'd spent my life trying to prove something to. He'd been a workaholic, rarely around when I was younger. My memories of him were mostly of him slipping out the door in the mornings before the sun came up and returning only when I was already asleep. He always had some excuse: work, meetings, travel. I was used to it, but it never made it any easier. By then, I had a family of my own, a husband, Danny, who was supportive but busy with his own career as a financial planner. We had 2 kids, Henry and Isabel, both teens at the time, and life was, well, life. Not perfect, but good enough. My job as a high school teacher kept me grounded, and I was content with the little moments, reading to the kids, talking with Danny, sitting at the dinner table with my family. But everything felt like it was in the background compared to the way my dad lived. His life was always big, always out there, while mine seemed small and wrapped up in the day-to-day grind. My dad, Thomas Ward, was known in our town. He'd spent 30 years as a top manager at a large tech company. They called him a legend in the industry, and he loved hearing it. He lived for those titles. I'd always been the shadow of his success, the one he could count on to hold down the fort while he made more of a name for himself. I'd hoped at some point we could be closer, but he always found ways to distance himself. When I was 19, he'd told me my dreams weren't practical enough. "You'll never get anywhere being just a teacher," he said. That was the kind of thing he did, pushing me down while lifting up anyone else who had the right pedigree. When the day came for his retirement party, I had mixed feelings. The event was being held at a fancy hotel ballroom, filled with colleagues, friends, and a handful of family members. There was no real need for me to be there, but I showed up for my mom and the kids. They were all thrilled to be part of it, but I couldn't shake this feeling that something about this event wasn't going to go as planned. I wore a black dress, modest, with a subtle lace trim, but even before I walked into the ballroom, I could feel the tension in my chest. My dad, standing tall as always, looked out over the crowd with a proud smirk. He had that power about him, the kind that made people stop talking when he entered the room. I sat down, the usual bitterness rising in me, but I couldn't tell anyone. My mom and siblings were so excited for him, and they wouldn't understand. Dinner was served and speeches were made. My dad stood up to thank everyone for their support over the years, his voice booming through the microphone. As usual, he spent most of the time talking about himself, how hard he'd worked, the sacrifices he'd made. And yet, I could never escape the feeling that I was, for some reason, invisible to him. At least, that's how it felt. After the speeches came the roast portion of the night, something my dad loved. He was always the center of attention, and somehow, even though he was retiring, it didn't feel like he was ready to give that up. He loved jokes at his expense, as long as they made him look charming or funny. But this year, he decided to turn the joke on me. He motioned to me from the stage. "Come on up, Carly," he said, a grin creeping onto his face. "Let's hear a few words from my daughter, the one who's always been in the shadow." The crowd chuckled, and I felt a lump form in my throat. I froze. This wasn't a roast. It felt off. Why was he doing this to me? I could already feel the heat creeping up my neck, the way I always felt when he put me on the spot like this. I stood up reluctantly, my legs shaky as I walked to the stage. I looked out at the audience. There was a part of me that wanted to turn around and walk out, just leave it all behind. But that wasn't me. I'd stayed in his shadow for so long. Maybe it was time to step into my own light. As I stood there, he continued, "This is my daughter Carly. She's the only one of us who didn't make it big. The only one who didn't follow the family business. A teacher. How cute, right? Don't get me wrong, We all need teachers, but he trailed off as the audience laughed. The laughter stung more than it should have. I could feel my face flush. My dad had always done this, made me the punchline of a joke, framed as a loving jest, but always aimed at undermining me. My dad, the legend, had never really thought much of what I did. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind raced. Should I laugh it off? Should I make a joke back? But then something inside me snapped. No more. I stood there on that stage, my dad's mocking words ringing in my ears. The laughter from the crowd echoed through my mind, and for a split second, it felt like everything slowed down. My dad was smiling, enjoying the show he was putting on for everyone. My mom, sitting at the table, didn't even notice the way my hands clenched into fists. No one did. They were all too busy reveling in the celebration of his retirement. But inside, I was seething. It wasn't just the words he'd said. It wasn't the joke about me being a teacher or the way he always belittled my career. It was the years of being second best in his eyes. The years of being ignored. The years of being the daughter who could never get his approval, no matter how hard I tried. And I'd tried so damn hard. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling, my knees threatening to buckle beneath me. I looked out at the crowd, trying to keep my composure. I could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on me. I had to say something that would make them all see, something that would make my dad realize he couldn't keep treating me like this. I grabbed the microphone. It felt heavy in my hands, like I was holding something that could change everything. For a moment, the room fell quiet. Even the clinking of glasses and murmurs of conversation died down. Everyone was waiting, expecting the next part of the show, expecting me to laugh along or fumble my way through some polite, self-deprecating comment. But I wasn't going to play that game anymore. I cleared my throat, and for a moment, I felt like I might choke on the words that were about to come out. But then I looked at my dad, really looked at him, standing there so sure of himself, so smug. I thought about the years of him dismissing me, the way he always put me down without even realizing the damage it was doing. I thought about how I'd spent most of my life trying to win his approval, and how I had failed every single time. It was time for a change. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice steady but sharp. The room seemed to lean in a little closer, the air thickening with anticipation. "You're right about one thing. I didn't follow the family business, and I didn't end up with the same kind of success you had. But maybe, just maybe, that's because I wasn't chasing something that wasn't mine." The words hung in the air. I could feel everyone watching me. I wasn't sure where the courage came from, but it felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders as I spoke. My dad blinked, his smile faltering slightly. For the first time in years, I could tell he didn't know how to respond. I continued. "I didn't spend my life building a legacy for myself at the expense of my family. I didn't put my job before the people who actually matter. I didn't sacrifice my kids, my marriage, my health for some title or paycheck. So, yeah, maybe I'm not the big shot you were hoping for, but I've got something you'll never have, and that's peace." The room was completely silent now. The weight of my words settled in, and I could hear my dad's sharp intake of breath. I hadn't planned on saying that, but once the words were out, I knew they had to be said. They were long overdue. My dad opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't done yet. "And you know what else?" I said, my voice gaining confidence. "You may think you're a legend, but I've spent my life watching you, and I've realized something. Your success didn't make you a better person. It made you more distant, more arrogant, more willing to cut people down just to keep your spot at the top. Well, guess what? I'm done being part of that game. I'm done chasing your approval." There was no laughter now. The room was frozen. My mom, sitting at the back, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. I could feel her shock, her disbelief. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I finally had their attention. "I'm proud of who I am, Dad, and I'm proud of what I've built, on my own terms. You may not see it, but that's okay. I don't need you to." And with that, I handed the microphone back to the host, turned on my heel, and walked off the stage. I didn't stay for the rest of the party. I didn't look back. I was shaking by the time I got to the parking lot, my pulse racing. The adrenaline was still coursing through me. I couldn't believe I'd said all of that. It was like a weight had been lifted. But at the same time, I felt like I'd just opened a floodgate. I knew there was no going back from this moment. Things with my dad would never be the same. I got in my car, slammed the door shut, and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My hands were still trembling as I started the engine. I drove home in silence, feeling like I was on the edge of something, unsure of where it would lead. The drive home was a blur. I could hardly focus on the road, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the way my dad had looked at me when I finished speaking, his face a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. For the first time in forever, I felt like I had his full attention. But it was more than that. I had his respect, or at least I thought I did. Or did I? By the time I pulled into my driveway, the house was quiet. It was late, and the kids were already in bed. Danny wasn't home yet, working late on a deal he'd been negotiating for weeks. He wouldn't be back until after midnight. The silence in the house felt different now, like it was heavy, pressing in on me. I went inside, closed the door softly behind me, and leaned against it for a second. My legs felt weak, like I might collapse right there. But I couldn't let myself fall apart, not yet. Not now. I walked into the living room, my gaze drifting to the empty space on the couch where Danny usually sat. The smell of his cologne still lingered in the air, and for some reason, it felt comforting. I needed to talk to him. I needed someone who understood me, who wasn't judging me, who wouldn't treat me like I was just a character in their game. But the longer I stood there, the more I realized that this wasn't just about what had happened at the party. It was about everything. The years of feeling invisible to my dad, the way he dismissed me, the way he always belittled my choices. This wasn't a one-time thing. It had been years in the making. And now, it was finally out in the open. I sat down on the couch and pulled my knees to my chest, hugging them tight. The house felt too big, too empty. It wasn't just the physical space that felt off. It was the emotional distance that had always existed between me and my dad. But now, something had changed. I had spoken up. I had taken control of my story for the first time in my life, and I had no idea what to do next. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from my mom. "Carly, I don't know what happened back there. What you said to your father, it was a lot. You need to talk to him. He's upset." I stared at the message for a moment. I didn't need to read between the lines. My mom wasn't upset at me. She was upset at the situation. She had always walked on eggshells around my dad, trying to keep the peace, smoothing over any discomfort before it could escalate. But this time, it wasn't something that could be smoothed over. I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. "I can't keep pretending anymore, Mom. I'm done." I stared at the message for a while before hitting send. I knew what it meant. I knew it would change things, but I didn't know how. The uncertainty gnawed at me, but there was a strange sense of clarity, too. For the first time, I wasn't backing down. I wasn't apologizing for who I was. I was done living in my dad's shadow. Minutes later, Danny came home, his keys jingling as he stepped through the door. He looked at me, then glanced at his phone. "Hey," he said softly. "What happened at the party? You look different." I stood up, the emotions I'd been holding in for hours rushing to the surface. "It was bad, Danny," I said, my voice catching. I snapped. I finally said everything I've been holding in for years. His face softened, concern flashing in his eyes. "What did you say?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before I spoke. I told him the truth. I told him I wasn't going to chase his approval anymore, that I didn't need to be what he wanted me to be. I told him I had peace, that I didn't need his validation. Danny didn't say anything at first. He just walked over and sat next to me on the couch, pulling me into his arms. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "But how do you feel about it?" "I don't know," I admitted, tears welling up in my eyes. "I feel like I've finally stood up for myself, but now, I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I can fix things with him." Danny didn't try to offer a solution or tell me everything would be okay. He just let me cry. For the first time in what felt like years, I let myself cry without worrying about being strong for anyone else. The tears came in waves, and when they finally subsided, I felt empty, but somehow lighter. The next few days were a blur. I didn't hear from my dad, not directly anyway. There were a few messages from family members. My siblings were texting me, asking what had happened, trying to get the full story. I didn't feel like explaining. I didn't want to talk about it. Then, 2 days after the party, I got the call. It was from my dad's office. My heart dropped in my chest as I answered. "Carly," my dad's assistant said, "Mr. Ward would like to meet with you. He's asked me to arrange a time for you both to sit down and talk." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. He wanted to talk. He wanted to meet. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or terrified, but there was no turning back now. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of constant uncertainty. The phone call from my dad's assistant had left me reeling. Part of me wanted to bury my head in the sand, pretend like none of this had happened. But the other part of me, the part that had finally spoken up, that had broken free from the shadows, knew I couldn't avoid this. Not anymore. I had to face it. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon at a cafe near my dad's office. He chose the place, of course, always with the little details. The irony of him still trying to control the situation didn't escape me. I had half a mind to cancel, to walk away, to let the silence hang between us forever. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something more than that. I wanted resolution. I wanted answers. I showed up early. The cafe had large windows that let in the afternoon sunlight, casting a soft, warm glow across the room. I sat at a table by the window, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that was long cold. The seconds seemed to stretch on forever. I kept checking my phone, the silence of the room amplifying every little sound, the clinking of plates, the hum of quiet conversations, the ticking of the clock above the counter. And then I saw him. He walked in, still in his business suit, looking as polished and self-assured as ever. The man didn't know how to show up anywhere without making a statement. As he approached my table, I noticed the slight hesitancy in his step, the way he looked around before locking eyes with me. It was the first time in years that I saw him look uncertain, and for a brief moment, I felt a rush of satisfaction. He sat down across from me, the usual smirk missing from his face. There was something different about him now. Maybe it was the silence, the weight of what had been said, or maybe it was just the fact that he didn't know how to react to me anymore. But there was a shift. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for his approval. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about what you said, Carly." His voice was lower than usual, almost cautious. "And I won't lie, it threw me off. I didn't see that coming. But, well, maybe you were right." My eyes widened in surprise. This wasn't the response I'd expected. Not even close. "I've been too focused on my career," he continued, looking down at his hands. "I've put so much into that. I didn't realize what it cost. Not until now. Not until you said what you did." The admission hung in the air. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to argue with him, to push him harder, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the sincerity in his voice, the fact that I'd never heard him speak like this before. Maybe it was the realization that, for the first time in my life, he wasn't dismissing my feelings. He wasn't brushing me off. "I didn't mean to make you feel small, Carly," he added, his voice softening. I guess I've always been afraid of being replaced, afraid of not being needed. And you, well, you always seemed like you had it all figured out, and He paused, like he was trying to find the words. "I was scared that you'd be better than me. that I wouldn't matter anymore. The weight of those words hit me like a wave. I wasn't sure how to respond. For years, I had thought he didn't care about me, that he didn't understand me, that he never took me seriously. But now, sitting across from him, it was clear that he'd been just as lost as I was. We were both trapped in our own separate worlds of fear and pride. "I don't want you to be proud of me because I followed your path, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I want you to be proud of me because I did things my way, because I stayed true to myself, and because I've built something real, something that doesn't rely on anyone else's approval." He nodded, his eyes softening. "I understand that now. I think I always understood it, but I was too proud to admit it. I didn't want to be the one left behind." There was a long pause as we both sat there, the weight of everything finally sinking in. I could feel the years of tension between us starting to unravel, thread by thread. It wasn't going to be an instant fix, nothing ever is, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, almost like a whisper. "I know I haven't been the father you needed me to be, and I'm sorry it took this long for me to realize it." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. This wasn't the man I had grown up resenting. This wasn't the man who'd belittled me, who'd ignored me, who'd made me feel insignificant. This was just my dad. A man who had lived with his own regrets, his own fears. A man who, at the end of it all, was finally trying to make things right. "I'm sorry too," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I should have said something sooner, but I didn't know how." We sat there in silence for a while, the coffee growing cold between us. It wasn't the resolution I'd imagined. There were no grand declarations, no immediate fix to the damage that had been done. But there was something there, something small but real, an understanding. "I think we still have time," my dad said quietly, breaking the silence. "Time to make things better. What do you think?" I nodded, slowly. "Yeah, I think we do." The days following that conversation with my dad felt like a strange mix of relief and apprehension. For once, the air between us wasn't suffocating. There were no more sharp words, no more passive-aggressive comments. He had finally admitted that he had been wrong, and I had finally admitted that I had been hurt. It felt like we were stepping onto new ground, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was just the beginning of something far more complicated. In the weeks that followed, we tried to rebuild. Small steps, tentative attempts at connection. My dad called me more often, asking how things were going with the kids, with work, with life in general. It was awkward at first, the conversations stiff and hesitant, but over time, they grew easier. There was no pretending anymore, no more following the script of what a father and daughter should talk about. It was real, and it was uncomfortable. But what surprised me the most was how much I had changed in the process. I had always thought that my dad needed to apologize, that he needed to take the first step. I thought that if he would just see me for who I was, everything would magically get better. But in those months of silence and reflection, I realized something. This wasn't just about him. It was about me, too. I had been holding on to that anger for so long. I had let it define me. It had shaped my relationship with him, and it had shaped my relationship with myself. I had spent my whole life trying to prove something to him, to get his approval. But now I had to face the fact that I didn't need him to validate me anymore. That was the hardest part of all. Letting go of the idea that his opinion of me mattered more than my own self-worth. I was sitting at my kitchen table one afternoon, working on some lesson plans for the upcoming semester when my phone buzzed. It was from my dad. "Carly, I know it's been a while. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I hope you're doing well." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I didn't know how to feel. I had waited so long for him to say those words, to hear him finally acknowledge me. And now that they were here, they felt incomplete. There was no grand gesture, no deep heart-to-heart conversation. Just a text. And yet, something inside me shifted. I took a deep breath and typed back, "Thanks, Dad. I'm doing good. I hope you are too." It wasn't much, but it was a start. A start of something that might be better, something that didn't have to be perfect, just real. That night, Danny and I sat down to dinner, and he looked at me with that familiar, concerned expression. "How's it going with your dad?" he asked, his voice soft but probing. I smiled, pushing my food around on my plate. "It's better. We're trying. It's not perfect, but I think we're getting there." Danny nodded, picking up his fork. "I'm proud of you for standing up to him. You know that, right?" "I know," I said, my voice quiet. "I think he's starting to see me. Finally." The words were strange to say. My dad had always seen me, just not in the way I had wanted him to. He had always been too focused on his own life, his own career, his own version of success. But now, there was a shift. I didn't need him to change, to be the father I'd always dreamed of. What mattered was that I had changed. I had stopped waiting for him to validate me, and in doing so, I had found the strength to stand on my own. But despite everything, a part of me still held back. A part of me couldn't fully let go of the past. It was like the wound was still there, even if it wasn't as raw anymore. And that's when I got the invitation. It came in the mail, a simple, elegant envelope with my dad's name written in neat, bold letters across the front. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. I opened it carefully and read the words inside. "Carly, I want to make things right. I've arranged something for us, a way to start fresh. Join me next Saturday for a dinner with the family. We'll talk. No distractions. Just us." I stared at the invitation, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what this was. This wasn't just about a dinner. This was my dad's way of trying to prove something, of trying to fix things in the way he knew best. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready for this. I wasn't sure if I could go back to the way things were before, to pretend like everything was fine. But I had come this far, hadn't I? I had stood up for myself. I had broken the cycle of silence, the cycle of resentment. Maybe this was the final step. Maybe this dinner would be the closure we both needed. Or maybe it would tear us apart for good. I spent the week leading up to the dinner in a constant state of unease. Every time I thought about it, my stomach twisted. Would this be the moment where everything fell into place, or would it all unravel again? I had no answers, only questions, and a lingering fear of disappointment. Saturday arrived, and I found myself standing in front of my closet, staring at the endless options. My mind was a mess of conflicting thoughts. What was I supposed to wear to a dinner where the future of my relationship with my father could be decided? The casual outfits seemed too much like a statement of defiance, while anything too formal felt like I was playing into his world again, the world that never really felt like mine. After a long, drawn-out battle with myself, I settled on a simple black dress, a compromise between the two extremes, comfortable but respectable. As I drove to the restaurant where we were meeting, my hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every mile. The city was quiet tonight, unusually still for a Saturday evening, but my mind was anything but calm. Every turn seemed to take me further from certainty and deeper into the unknown. When I finally pulled into the restaurant's parking lot, I sat in my car for a moment, just breathing. The nerves were overwhelming. Could I really walk into that room and sit across from my dad, face to face with all the history we had, good, bad, and everything in between? Could we be different? Could I be different? I walked into the restaurant and immediately spotted him. My dad was already there, sitting at the corner booth, the same quiet authority about him that had always been there. But tonight, there was something else, something almost vulnerable. He was still dressed in his usual business attire, but there was a noticeable shift in his posture, like he was waiting for me, like he didn't know how to start. "Carly," he said when he saw me approach, standing up slightly as if to greet me, his voice uncertain. "I'm glad you could make it." I sat down across from him, trying to keep my nerves in check. The waitress came over, took our orders, and disappeared, leaving the two of us in a strangely awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, heavy with everything unsaid. I tried to look at him differently, really look at him, not just as the man who had failed me over and over again, but as my father, a person who had his own regrets, his own fears. And maybe, just maybe, I could understand him now. "So," I started, my voice breaking the quiet, "how have you been?" My dad looked at me, his brow furrowing, as if he hadn't expected that question. "I've been okay. Work's been busy, as usual." He sighed. "But you're probably asking about more than just that." I nodded. "Yeah, I guess I am." He paused, looking down at the table, fiddling with his napkin. Then he met my gaze. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I haven't been the father you needed, but I want to change that. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Carly, but I want us to try. I want to be part of your life the way I should have been." I looked at him for a long moment, unsure how to respond. His words were simple, but they were heavy. They felt like a beginning, but also a plea that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the man I thought he was. "Dad, I don't need you to be perfect," I said, my voice steady now. "I just need you to be here, and I need you to stop thinking that your way is the only way. You're not the only one with something to offer. I've built my own life, my own career. I don't need you to approve of every decision I make. I just need you to see me for who I am." His face softened. "I see you, Carly. I've always seen you, but I've been too proud to admit it, too focused on what I wanted that I never took the time to see you. I've been so afraid of losing control that I forgot what really mattered." The words hung between us for a while, but they didn't feel as heavy anymore. They felt real. And for the first time in my life, I felt like my father was truly hearing me. The conversation that followed was full of awkward pauses and stumbling sentences, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was healing. We spoke of things I never thought we'd discuss, our shared disappointments, our shared regrets. We didn't fix everything that night. We didn't come away with a perfect resolution, but we did come away with something else, something that was far more important than fixing the past. We came away with a new understanding, and that understanding was enough. The dinner ended too soon, but as I stood to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't sure what would happen from here, but I knew one thing for certain. I had done the hard work. I had faced my fears. I had stopped waiting for my dad to change and accepted him as he was, and in turn, I had changed. I had found peace in the middle of all the chaos. And when we hugged goodbye, it felt different. It wasn't just an obligatory embrace. It was the first time in a long while that I could honestly say I wasn't afraid of what came next. I drove home that night, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over me. There was still a lot of work ahead, a lot of walls to break down, but this was a start, a real start. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe easy. And as I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't help but smile. I had taken the mic, I had spoken the truth, and now I was finally ready to live it.